welcome back, everyone. I'm Lena Hatchett, Associate Professor at the Nieswanger Institute right here at Loyola. I'll give folks a moment to come back from break. I see some phenomenal colleagues in education, public health, nursing, old friends, new friends. Welcome, everyone. All right. I wanted the opportunity to talk about my own bio for a particular reason. I didn't want to be introduced because our bios talk about what we've done and what we've accomplished. And if you take a look at mine, it looks pretty good. Working with Robert Wood Johnson, funded by Trinity Health System, got a book chapter. And it's not that those things are unimportant. Those are truly my accomplishments that I'm proud of. But what the bio doesn't tell you about me, Lena Hatchett, is how I created each and every one of those accomplishments. And the key word in my bio is co-founder of Proviso Partners for Health. And as an academic at Loyola, there's a lot of expertise, skills, and experience I bring to my work on racial and economic equity. But it is co-founding this coalition with a community resident, her name is Loretta Brown, that has made transformation in this community. We had the same values of what we could do in the Maywood and the Proviso community that is so important. She, as I, is a woman with lived experience of inequity. And it is our ability to understand the needs around race and class and oppression that has helped create the successes that I'm going to talk about. And Loretta couldn't be here this morning with me because as a great grandmother, she is raising her 8-year-old great grandson. And she's in her late 70s. She has helped to build this community and she has helped to build her family. And we need to understand those stories of resilience and transformation if we're going to actually transform the systems that Kim Fox has talked about. So I'm going to give you a few highlights of our work around collaboration. Proviso Partners for Health started as a seed in a project called Cook County Green Corps. And we worked with youth who were justice involved from Maywood. Some were in and out of college. Some were recent graduates from high school. We didn't look at what those youth lost, what they lacked, or where they were deficient. We started to ask them about their hopes, their dreams, and their visions for their future. Not what they didn't have, but what they hope to achieve going forward. We didn't hold it against them. We didn't actually ask who did what, when, where, or why. We didn't care because it was about their future. And in that project, particularly my stance on it, we were growing food. I didn't know how to grow food. We were building an urban farm. I didn't know how to build an urban farm. I didn't let it get in our way of what we were going to achieve because I relied on collaboration. I could relate to youth, and that's what I brought to the project. And I could partner with our public health system, our other allies within the community who did have the skills and the resources and the ability to achieve our big goal. The success of Cook County Green Corps wasn't because of my leadership. It was about my ability to collaborate and listen and learn how to fulfill this goal. And everything I'm going to say today is about our ability as academics, as students, as Loyola, to actually listen to people with lived experience of inequity to share power. And I in all honesty, right, I didn't start out, I figured I knew what to do and I had this degree and I had this experience and I was going to create the solution and the bold goal, and ask community to engage in it. And I learned very quickly the hard way that I was actually harming community, harming our youth, rather than helping them fulfill their dreams. So Cook County Green Corps was about listening to the experience. And we were growing food and we were interested in food access. But our 18 to 24-year-olds explained to me very clearly, very loudly, and very angrily, it's not about getting access to food. If I could have a job and an income and an opportunity, I would have my own money to do with it what I wanted, including buying food. And so how many of us are investing in small scale problems and not getting at the root cause, right? Of poverty, disinvestment, as Ms. Fox has told us, historic disinvestment, generational poverty, and taking time, resources, grant funding, and effort to just put a Band-Aid on the problem and not get to the root cause creates the harm within our systems and not the opportunity that our young people need. And we learned the hard way, Loretta and I, but we quickly built on the information that our young people was explaining to us by listening, by sharing power, and by allowing people with lived experience of inequity to lead. Right? So we didn't let not knowing stop us. We collaborated. And the key thing that brought us all together is what we're going to do today, is having a bold vision for where we're going. I'm going to ask you a little later to not think about what resources you don't have, what expertise you don't have, what time and lack thereof you don't have to achieve something, the barriers in your way, and the people out there that are trying to stop you. I want to ask you the hardest question. What would you do if you had all of the resources, all of the staff, all of the time, all of the expertise? What would you actually do? And in Proviso Partners for Health, we were able to bring the community together and ask that question of what is our bold vision of what we want our community to look like? Because if we don't have a bold vision of where we're going, guess what? We're not going to get there. And while there are challenges, while there are lack of know-how, expertise, and resources, don't let that stop us from visioning about where we want to go. And my little time here is about bold, dreaming big with a bold vision, and taking actions in small steps. As academics, sometimes we spend a lot of time planning and preparing, controlling and owning and utilizing our power, and a very little time on having a big, bold vision for where we want to get to. And from our community here in Maywood, we learned that the bold vision is going to bring your collaborators together. The bold vision is going to strengthen your collaboration and your work. And our actions start small and build over time. So from Cook County Green Corps, learning from those youth of 18 to 24, that was in 2010, they told us a blueprint of what they wanted for their futures. And Loretta and I started to think about, oh, what could we do to rebuild the economic system in our community? And who would we need to collaborate with? And if we're talking about food and health, we got to talk about economics, and we got to do something about the economics in the community and not just think our job is to sit in a garden and grow food. We have to look at why this community doesn't have food in the first place, and how our youth who live here can be the drivers of transformation and not the recipients of handouts and distributions and charity, right? We got to look at the Black, brown, white racism and conflict in our community that stops us from collaborating, and see if we can tear that down to get to our bold vision. Loretta was fearless, and I held on to her coattails and dreamed big too. And we didn't let any of these barriers, crime, education, poverty, systemic racism, we don't let any of those things get in our way, because we got nothing left to lose. Our youth are relying on us, and we have nothing left to lose. So we dream big, and we take actions in small steps, and we collaborate with our partners from public health, from the food industry to social enterprises, national partners, 8-year-olds. There aren't any limits to our ability to collaborate and to create the vision that we have. So today, in our time, I'm going to ask us to come to the table to dream big. What could we do as a collaborative, as an institution of Loyola, that we can't do by ourselves, that we could do together? We're not going to talk about what we don't have and who's not going to let us and if only. I wanted to take an opportunity to dream big. What would you do if you had all of the resources and you were not using the excuses? And then we're going to start to act small by looking at what would we achieve in 150 days to set us on the pathway. And it's a different kind of mindset, and I've learned it from the community, and we're going to try it here as an institution. So no excuses allowed. Just allow this time to dream. I'm going to give you a minute to think about that challenge that I put forth. I'm going to introduce you to Lisa Jacobs and Dave Olson. Some of you may know them very well, and it's a privilege to share their work and expertise and their long history. Lisa Jacobs manages the Loyola University Center for Criminal Justice Research, Policy, and Practice. And they are working hard to advance fair, humane, and effective criminal and juvenile justice policies and practice. Now, prior to the center's launch, Lisa served as program manager for the Illinois Models for Change initiative. And there she was promoting effective juvenile justice policy practice and programming in diverse jurisdictions across the state and in the nation. We're so thankful to have Lisa at Loyola, and she was the director of the judicial education for Illinois Supreme Court with the Administrative Office of the Illinois Courts. So much experience, know-how, and practice right in our table, right here at Loyola. She currently provides subject matter expertise and technical assistance to jurisdictions working to improve the outcomes of youth dually involved in the child welfare and the juvenile justice systems. She's a consultant with RFK, National Resource Center for Juvenile Justice. There is a link to Lisa's information and her expertise. Someone can put that in the chat for us. And she'll be sharing her time with Dr. David Olson here today. And he's a professor in criminal justice and criminology department at Loyola University Chicago. And he's a co-director of Loyola's Interdisciplinary Center for Criminal Justice, Research, Policy, and Practice. For nearly 20 years, Dr. Olson has worked at the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, where he directs the Illinois statewide drug and violent crime control strategy impact evaluation program. I'm going to turn the floor over to Lisa and David, and I'd like us all, as we enter in these mini introductions to our work, to think about what we can do as a collaborative Loyola. What bold vision could we create, and the small steps of action that we can build towards it as you listen to each of our stories today. Thank you. Take it away, Lisa.
Thank you. And Dr. Olson, the floor is yours.
Okay, Lisa and I are gonna split up our 15 minutes. So my stopwatch has started. Thank you very much, everybody, for allowing us to participate. And I want to extend a special thanks to Jenny for not only organizing this event with her colleagues, but also welcoming us from the social sciences and the Lakeside campus to her and her colleagues. I also wanted to thank Lucia, because she's really the one that put our center in connection with the health sciences campus. Lucia saw a COVID and crime dashboard that my colleague Don Steeman created, and reached out to us, and since then we've been regularly participating in the meetings at the health science campus. And so we just wanted to take a brief moment to provide you with a little bit of understanding of the center, kind of its origins, its goals, its purpose, and then some of the projects that we're working on, just to give you a flavor for some of the opportunities that there might be for some increased collaboration. So the Center for Criminal Justice Research, Policy, and Practice, which is a long name and tongue ties a lot of people, is a unique collaboration between Loyola's College of Arts and Sciences and the School of Law. The center is co-directed by myself and my colleague Diane Garrity, who's a faculty member at the law school. As was mentioned, Lisa's the manager. My colleague Don Steeman, the chair of the Criminal Justice Department, is also a colleague in the center, and Amanda Ward is a postdoc that's been working in the center. I didn't list all of the students working in the center because I didn't want to fill up 2 or 3 slides, but since our inception, we've had probably close to 40 to 50 undergraduate and graduate students from a variety of disciplines work with us on different projects. The center was actually envisioned as part of Loyola's Plan 2020, the strategic plan that was launched in 2015. And we were fortunate enough to receive some seed funding from the MacArthur Foundation to start our work. What we try to do is provide students with experiential learning opportunities where they get the opportunity to collaborate with us, performing research, what we describe as applied research, with the ultimate goal of advancing the effectiveness of criminal justice policy and practice. We get involved a lot in working with state and local criminal justice agencies and stakeholders around strategic planning efforts, conducting research to evaluate the effectiveness or the impact of policy. And we also try to train practitioners and better educate them on some of the issues that we're finding and that they need to recognize. We've been fairly successful in attracting external funding. So since the launch of the center in 2015, we've gotten a little bit over $4 million in external funding, not only from foundations, but from a variety of governmental agencies. So to give you a little bit of a sense of what we do in the center and how we try to bring together really the tenets of what a Loyola faculty member is expected to do, through the center, we provide teaching, research, and service opportunities. I want to just touch on a couple of these to give you a sense of some of the things that we do. Obviously, we do a lot of research. This is either faculties and students working on research projects that are related to topics of interest to the students. But we also receive external funding to carry out specific research projects where, again, we involve faculty from a variety of disciplines. We collaborate with partners at other universities, and we also use that to support students that are working with us on these projects. We also provide a lot of service to the field. Collectively, we serve on a large number of advisory boards and commissions at both the adult and juvenile justice system level. We also work a lot with organizations that are serving justice-involved populations. And then lastly, with teaching, what we do in terms of teaching is the traditional teaching that a lot of academics would envision. We have students in classes that are engaged in research activities. But we also teach through speaking to other audiences. And so kind of an invitation for anybody at the health sciences campus. If you're ever interested in having one of us come out and speak to you or your colleagues or your students to help better educate them about the justice system and how it functions and some of the issues that it faces, we're happy to do that. We also speak and present information to a lot of external stakeholders. We see education not just being confined to the university, but we try to educate elected officials. We try to educate legislators and policymakers, because oftentimes they don't have a background in criminal justice. They may not have an understanding of criminal justice research or the science behind it, and we try to educate them as well, along with various advocacy organizations that we try to educate and provide better understanding to. Just to give you a sample of some of the projects that we're doing, and I kind of picked a few that I think are illustrative of the breadth of our work. We're currently working on a project looking at how the justice system responds to gun crime in Illinois. And because of so much of that activity occurring in Cook County, where State's Attorney Fox is the state's attorney, we focus on that as well. One of the things we found in that research is that if being punitive with people who illegally possess guns reduced crime, Chicago would be the safest place in the state of Illinois. What we have found is that despite the rhetoric, sentencing practices in Cook County have historically been extremely punitive. Things have changed somewhat under Kim Fox. She is trying to use diversion more to therapeutic interventions to address individuals who are charged with illegally possessing a gun. We're also collaborating with the city of Chicago. For those of you who may not be aware, they launched a comprehensive plan to reduce violence in Chicago. We're collaborating with the mayor's office to help them in the form of research to evaluate the effectiveness and impact of some of their efforts. We're developing a criminal justice data dashboard with stakeholders in Cook County so that practitioners but citizens alike can access information to better understand what's going on in the justice system that their tax dollars support and that the elected officials that they select are operating. We're also doing some work on improving prosecution performance. My colleague Don Steeman is leading a project that includes not only Cook County, but large jurisdictions across the country in developing performance measures and indicators for prosecutors' offices. And then lastly, we're also doing a lot of work with state and local practitioners and policymakers around reform efforts. We're working with the what's called the R3 board, the Renew, Restore, and Reinvest, which is the effort by the state of Illinois to take tax dollars generated from marijuana sales and focus those resources back into communities with the greatest need. As was mentioned by State's Attorney Fox, we've done a lot of research around bond court reform efforts, both in Cook County and the state as a whole. And we've also done a lot of work to improve and enhance reentry policies and practices for those individuals who are coming out of institutional corrections. The last example of what we're working on, and I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to talk about, is we've been increasing our focus and understanding of what's referred to as emerging adults, and Lisa will explain a little bit more about what's meant by emerging adults, but how the justice system responds to these young offenders who are legally adults, but cognitively and developmentally maybe more like juveniles. So I'll stop there and I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you. And good morning, everybody. It is wonderful to have the opportunity to be with you this morning to learn about the work you all are doing and the work that Loyola is really leading in Chicago, in Cook County, in Illinois, and beyond. And I'm also really pleased to be able to spend just a few minutes sharing some of the work that Dr. Olson just referenced, our work around emerging adults who are in contact with the justice system. And because we have such a short amount of time, I sort of feel like this is a speed date, if you will. So I'm going to put some things out there that maybe will pique your interest. And as Dr. Olson mentioned, one of the things that I think has been really important in our work as a center is dialogue and talking with people doing this kind of work or work that's related, but we may not even realize is related until we start talking with one another and learning from our shared work and realize that we can have a bigger impact if we're working together, sharing ideas and collaborating. So hopefully what I'm about to share with you plant some seeds for that kind of collaboration. If we had all day together, we would dive really deeply into the research about emerging adults in contact with the justice system. We'd look at the developmental research around the ways in which young adults are really a different group of people than either younger adolescents or fully mature adults. We'd look at the neuroscience and the brain scans, and we'd see what I find as a former biology student in my undergrad days, really compelling evidence that our brains are different when we are between the ages of 18 and let's say 25 than they will be when we're 50. We would look at the data, and Dr. Olson and Dr. Steeman and Dr. Ward have done really groundbreaking work to pull out data around emerging adults from our criminal justice system data sets and shown. So again, data that I think is incredibly compelling about the high prevalence of emerging adults in our criminal justice systems. Put plainly, there are a lot of emerging adults who get arrested, who are admitted to jail, who are in our court system. There are a lot of them. They comprise big proportions of our caseloads at every step of the way in our criminal justice systems. And then we've got much more limited data, but again, still compelling data that I think shows we don't get the kind of outcomes with emerging adults that any of us on this program today would want in terms of future offending, in terms of access to treatment resources and the kind of things that we know really support well-being of communities and people in communities. So if we had all day together, we would focus on all of that research and data and hopefully come away convinced that we have to focus on emerging adults if we want the kind of outcomes that State's Attorney Kim Foxx talked about from our institutions. And I think Dr. Hatchett referenced young adults in the work that she does and what we're learning from them. So if we're all convinced that emerging adults need to be a focus of our work when we're focusing on criminal justice research, policy, and practice, I want to share a little bit about what we're seeing happen across the country and here in Illinois. The first is good news. I think when we started this focus on emerging adults, which was in some ways an outgrowth of both our juvenile justice work and our criminal justice work at Loyola, and we really started to focus on the 18 to 25-year-olds, you'd get some strange looks if you suggested that emerging adults were not the same as fully mature adults. Not everywhere, certainly, probably not among the kind of folks on this program. But if you were talking to the average legislator, for example, you might get the eyebrow raised, and we did. And we even would get reactions like, oh, come on. When you're 18, you know right from wrong. You're a fully fledged adult. You can, serve in the military and go fight and die for your country. You're an adult, and we need to just treat you as an adult in the criminal justice system. I think today we're much less likely to get that kind of pushback on the idea that emerging adults are different in important ways. And that kind of, it's certainly not a universal acceptance, and it's absolutely not a universal, there is not universal reflection of what the research and the science and the data tell us in our policy or practice. But there's momentum. And we can see that momentum reflected in a lot of different ways across the country and in Illinois. We can see what I call systemic change. Dr. Olson referenced a little bit about the statutory changes that we're seeing in Illinois. Young adulthood is being recognized more frequently in Illinois law. One example is in the new criminal justice reform bill that's awaiting the governor's consideration and signature. There's a provision that would change how we sentence young adults, particularly whether and how we would designate them as habitual offenders. We see embedded in Illinois law a first-time weapons offender program and sentencing provision in Illinois law that recognizes these differences of emerging adults. And one of the more, I was going to say radical, but that implies judgment. One of the more bold, I think, and I'll leave it up to you all to kind of to think about the impact that it would have. One of the more bold ways that states are tackling the realities around emerging adults is trying to raise the age of juvenile court jurisdiction so that youth up to, let's say, 21 would be subject to the juvenile courts when they are arrested versus adult courts. Vermont is in the middle of that. Massachusetts is on the cusp of that. And there is legislation pending again in Illinois to raise the age. We also see things like young adult court models, and we could spend a lot of time talking about that. In fact, Chief Judge Tim Evans of the Circuit Court of Cook County just recently published with the Illinois Supreme Court a column calling for a third approach, a separate approach for young adults when they come into our justice systems. We see more diversion efforts focused on emerging adults. I think in acknowledgement of what both Kim Fox and Dr. Hatchett referenced, which is the harm that can occur when young adults are pulled into our justice systems. And so these diversion efforts really focus on either keeping them out as much as possible or preventing a conviction. Cook County is starting a very innovative diversion program that we have helped them both with data analysis to help target and then some technical assistance to help design. They're starting a diversion program focused on young adults who are charged with possession of drugs with intent to distribute. So these are the young adults who are allegedly engaged in drug sales in communities in Cook County, distinguished from those with substance abuse treatment needs who need to be on a different path toward treatment. This program is really focusing on young adults who are selling drugs to survive and to earn money. And so, as you can imagine, if that's the target, to keep these young adults from getting a serious felony conviction for selling drugs, the interventions really need to be focused on alternatives for those young adults to earn money, meaningful jobs, meaningful connections with their communities, and a path away from selling drugs to earn money and to survive. Because our time is so limited, I'll really fly through what Loyola is doing. As Dr. Olson already alluded to, I think sometimes one of the most important things that Loyola is doing is creating a space or creating a venue for conversations and relationships and knowledge sharing and knowledge transfer, particularly around emerging adults. And we've done a lot of that over the last 5 years. And as I hinted, Loyola was really on the forefront in Illinois and beyond in this focus on emerging adults. And so bringing people together and sharing what the lens that we're looking through is criminal justice involvement, but those in a healthcare realm, for example, are seeing some of the same things through this different kind of lens. So bringing people together and sharing what we know, what we value in terms of outcomes with young adults, and planting seeds for the kind of work that I talked about in terms of systemic change, diversion, community-focused partnerships. We've been doing a lot of research and data analysis. As I said, Dave and Don and Amanda are really the pioneers of making emerging adult data available in Illinois. Without them, we would know a lot less, and we would be a lot less effective in our work to improve outcomes with emerging adults. We've convened an Illinois Emerging Adults Network to formally focus on this issue of policy and practice when emerging adults are arrested and introduced into the criminal justice system. We paused that work during the pandemic because so many of our members of that network are on the front lines of figuring out how a criminal justice system responds to the pandemic, but we're about to start up again. And I think one of the things the Emerging Adults Network is going to need to focus on is this partnership between community-based corrections, community corrections, probation, for example, and how they work with community partners to keep young adults out of prison, frankly, and out of that trajectory into prison. We're also working at the national level. We've got a project underway with the National League of Cities where we're bringing stakeholders from across the country together to focus on improving outcomes. And that's mayors and police chiefs, judges, state legislators, really a wide swath of people from across the country. We're providing technical assistance and subject matter expertise as we try to spread these innovations across the country. And we're also conducting an updated, what we call a national scan. So if you're particularly interested in this topic, we're working with students, law students in this case, at Loyola, to create a national tool that can be used. If you're convinced that we need to focus on emerging adults differently, here are some ways that places across the country are doing it, and here are some lessons that we're learning. In the last probably 2 minutes I have with you, I just want to touch on what those lessons really are. And we've already heard so much about them. So whether we're talking about a change in statute, whether we're talking about a diversion program, whether we're talking about a community-based partnership with young adults who are justice system involved, we are hearing clear themes of what works and what young adults need. And the first clear theme we're hearing is that emerging adults really are different. The brain scans are not lying to us. Young adults are different from younger teenagers, and we need to acknowledge that and work with them differently. And they're very different from fully mature adults in their 30s and 40s and 50s. So the practitioners across the country and across Illinois are saying, yes, emerging adults really are different, and we need to acknowledge that and respond to that if we want our work to have an impact. We hear a lot about relentless engagement. And I think Kim Fox alluded to that, this idea that, and certainly Dr. Hatchett, your remarks alluded to that. We can't just, offer a referral to a program and think that young adults are going to take us up on what we want to offer them. This idea of relentless, repeated engagement, especially with young adults who've experienced some pretty profound traumas. If we want to make linkages with them that keep them out of penetration of the justice system, people have to be willing to engage over and over and to acknowledge that we're going to have slip-ups along the way. We've heard from young adults that partnership and supports, particularly in non-judgmental ways. I was listening on a panel just a couple of weeks ago, young adults across the country, and they said it in different ways, but they all said the same thing. They wanted adults to help them figure out what was happening and how to navigate these systems that we pull them into. They don't know language like terms of probation or the sentencing language that we use or the acronyms that we use or the terms of their probation, for example, and what it means to them. They want an adult partner who's on their side, invested in their success, helping them navigate these things. They may not call it that, but they're also very interested in restorative approaches to build, rebuild, strengthen relationships within their families and their communities. And they are dealing with pretty significant traumas when we're looking at young adults who get to the point where they're being arrested and facing jail or incarceration. There's often traumatic experiences and a history of trauma that we have to acknowledge and we have to address. And I think that across the country and in Illinois, we're building our capacity to work with young adults who've experienced this kind of trauma. And then last but not least, the theme that we hear is, we may think that we are justice system practitioners. We are probation officers, we're judges, we're police officers, we're researchers. But if we're not attending to the basic needs of young adults, shelter and food and clothing, we're not going to get very far in our other interventions or our other strategies that we're employing. So many young adults who are enmeshed in the justice system don't have housing, don't have food, don't have these basic needs met. And if we're not attentive to that first and foremost, we're not going to get very far with the other things we're doing. So in the home stretch of our speed dating here, looking ahead, I think the theme is that we have momentum and partnerships and people really interested in delving into the research and the data and applying what we know from both the research, the data, and then the human beings who work with young adults, really applying that knowledge to what our laws say, to what our policies say, and to what we're investing in. And I think looking into 2021, there's a solid recognition that if we want better outcomes, if we want safer communities, if we want young adults to be on a path toward well-being, we've really got to focus on the unique challenges and the unique opportunities that young adults present us. And last but not least, I'll say that the data makes it very, very clear that if we want in any way to tackle the racial inequities that we have in our justice systems, to start to build racial equity and racial justice, again, it's going to take us to a focus on emerging adults. So thanks for sharing the time together this morning. And I hope that we can build collaboration across the university and with the communities that you all are serving in your work as well. That was very fast, but thank you.